With the DCU being DC's next big attempt at a live-action cinematic universe that connects a large majority of the characters from the source material, there's a huge opportunity to bring to life a lot of DC elements that we haven't seen in the past, at least in the live-action sphere specifically. And with DC owning the rights to around 98% of their characters in live action, there's no end to the potential adaptations that we could see. And that brings us to the topic of this video, which is teams that I think we should see in the DCU. But very quickly, before we get into the video, if you guys enjoy the content, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit the hype button if you guys have that feature available. Diving right into the topic, again, we know that the goal of the DCU is to bring a lot of the characters from the source material to the forefront to further popularize the DC brand. And with James Gunn of all people being the one that's spearheading this universe, it makes sense as to why DC is trying to bring as many characters into the fold as possible. By extension of that, I do expect to see a lot of teams in the DCU that a lot of casual fans may not be experienced with outside of the source material. That being said, before I get into the list of teams that I want to see in the DCU, I just want to clarify that this list is in no particular order, and that's specifically because I couldn't think of the order that I would put these teams in because I kind of want all of these teams to an equal degree. I'm also going to try my best to explain how these teams would fit into the DCU based on what we know so far story-wise. So kicking off the list, I have a subset of the Justice League, and that is the Justice League International. Now in the source material, the Justice League International is a version of the Justice League that forms after the OG Justice League disbands, and it's also ran by Maxwell Lord. If you've been watching the DCU, you know that we sort of have this team in its early stages with the Justice Gang because they have Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, and are also being run by Maxwell Lord. It's also important to note that the Justice League International roster in the source material consists of Batman, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Dr. Fate, Shazam, Ted Kord Blue Beetle, Martian Manhunter, Booster Gold, Mr. Miracle, Black Canary, Dr. Light, etc., etc. One thing that's important to reference is that a lot of those characters are already confirmed for the DCU. Mr. Miracle's getting his own TV series. It's being developed by Tom King right now. We've already seen Guy Gardner. We know that Batman is coming. Martian Manhunter has been teased and confirmed multiple times by James Gunn. Ted Kord was referenced in the Blue Beetle movie, and he's also going to be appearing in the Blue Beetle animated series that comes out. That's going to be technically a sequel to that movie. Booster Gold is confirmed to be getting his own live action TV show, and so on and so forth. The Justice League International has also been teased by James Gunn quite a bit since he started at DC Studios. And this team fits perfectly within the structure of the current DCU because of the fact that governments and corporations are effectively at war with metahumans. And because a lot of metahumans either work for governments or corporations, the Justice League International just fits perfectly for that because they are a government/corporation owned Justice League. Moving on to the next team I think makes sense to appear in the DCU, I have none other than the Outsiders. Now in the source material, for those of you who don't know, the Outsiders is formed by Batman after he disbands from the Justice League. Now I don't really think that this is going to happen in the same way that it happens in the comics in the DCU. However, there is a way that they could adapt it very similarly. And what they could do is that they could have Batman disband from the Justice League International because of it being corporate owned, and have Batman create his own team in the Outsiders. And this is obviously under the assumption that these teams predate the Justice League, because I'm pretty sure we're going to get the Justice League International in the DCU before we get the actual real deal Justice League. But the roster of the Outsiders in the source material typically consists of the likes of Black Lightning, Geoforce, Katana, Halo, Metamorpho, Batman obviously, and a couple of other rotating members that have appeared on the team later on. Since we're on the topic of Batman-led teams, I also think that there's another Batman-led faction/team that could have a high chance of appearing in the DCU, and that is Batman Incorporated. For those of you who don't know, Batman Incorporated is actually a corporate-funded Batman organization that Bruce Wayne sponsors himself under the guise of him just being Bruce Wayne and not Batman, obviously. The purpose of Batman Incorporated in the source material is to turn Batman's symbol into a symbol of peace all around the world. By extension of this, a lot of the members in Batman Incorporated obviously operate under the guise of being a Batman affiliate, and they just do what Batman's mission is all around the world. The way this could tie into the DCU is that we already know that governments and corporations are funding superheroes, and this could be Wayne Enterprises' way of doing the same exact thing. We already know that James Gunn has said that the big corporations in the DCU, Wayne Enterprises, Lord Tech, and Luthor Corp are vying for a type of control or power, and obviously we know that Bruce Wayne's company is going to be on the good end of that because he's a hero, so the best way that I could see his company fitting into that is by doing something like Batman Incorporated. And this would be a great way to showcase some of the lesser known Batman lore lore in live action. And we could also see characters like Ghostmaker introduced into the fold as well. As far as the roster for Batman Incorporated, it's obviously consisting of the main Bat family members, so Nightwing, Red Hood, Tim Drake, Azrael, Damian Wayne, Oracle, Batgirl Cassandra Cain, Signal, Batwing, Batwoman, etc. And then on the global side of things, you obviously have the likes of Ghostmaker, you have the Batman of China, the Batman of Japan, Dark Ranger, El Gaucho, Grey Wolf, Knight/Squire, Man of Bats, Night Runner, and Raven Red. Again, because of the direction of the DCU and James Gunn's style, I could definitely see him trying to incorporate some of these lesser known characters into the world of Batman, and also just using this division in its entirety because, again, the DCU is looking to incorporate corporations and how they affect metahumans. Batman Incorporated could also run parallel to the Justice League in my opinion and not really conflict with anything. The next team that I would like to see in the DCU is another Justice League subset, and that is the Justice League Dark. Obviously, we know that the DCU is introducing Swamp Thing in his very own horror film that's going to be directed by James Mangold. So this effectively opens the door to introduce the entire world of the Justice League Dark because all of them are really tied to Swamp Thing. John Constantine is tied to Swamp Thing, Zatanna is tied to John Constantine, Deadman is as well, etc. This team is also just a fan favorite and is something that people have been asking for from DC in live action for years. And I think that it could easily fit the DCU, especially considering that I think by the time we get to the Justice League, it'll be more like Justice League Unlimited and less like the original 7. It'll be a very large faction of heroes coming together, in my humble opinion. Moving on to another team, and this team has already effectively been confirmed for the DCU, and that is the Teen Titans. This team goes without saying, obviously, in my opinion. The Teen Titans are arguably the best team that DC has to offer in the source material behind the Justice League. With the next generation of superheroes being very pivotal to the story of DC in its entirety, I think that it just makes sense to have them in the DCU. And again, this team is already confirmed, so it just goes without saying. Since we're on the topic of the Teen Titans though, I do have another team in mind that is effectively a subset of the Teen Titans, and that is the Young Justice. And the main reason I want this team in the DCU is because, again, I just feel like the next generation of superheroes is a very, very important aspect of storytelling in the DC universe. Seeing the young generation of heroes try to find their way as heroes and walk in the path of those that came before them is one of the most impactful elements of the DC mythos. The way I would incorporate the Young Justice into the DCU is by having them, again, just be a subset of the Teen Titans that Nightwing is in charge of. This would not only be good for furthering Nightwing's role as a leader, but it would also be good for showcasing the role that he and the other Titans play as mentors and heroes that the younger generation look up to. And that would be poetic because there was once a time where Nightwing and the Titans also looked up to the heroes that came before them, like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. And obviously all of those heroes would still be around because we would still be pretty early into the DCU, but seeing Nightwing and Kid Flash now become The Flash and Donna Troy and Starfire all be referred to as equals to the likes of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, in my opinion, is a story that the DCU just has to tell. As far as the Young Justice roster in the DCU, I would be completely fine with having the likes of Tim Drake, Connor Kent Superboy, Cassie Sands Mark Wonder Girl, Ravager Rose Wilson, Impulse, etc. The next team I have on the list is a team that again is confirmed for the DCU, but so far their project hasn't really made any headway, and that is none other than the Authority/Stormwatch. The main appeal of this team, in my opinion, would be to showcase a more gore and gritty aspect of the DC universe. If you're familiar with the Authority comic books and Stormwatch in general, it's essentially just The Boys meets the DC universe. However, that in itself is probably the reason why it's so hard to develop this, because Gunn probably doesn't want to do a retread of The Boys just in DC. But I honestly think what makes the Authority so compelling is the fact that it is The Boys, but they have the DC universe, which is like what you would traditionally expect superheroes to be like in their reflection. Seeing these more realistic superheroes in terms of their morality interact with the larger than life superheroes is what makes that, in my opinion, a compelling story. So that's the approach that I would take to the Authority if I were to adapt them in the DCU. Another way that you could tie them into the DCU easily, in my opinion, is by having what Lex Luthor establishes as Planet Watch in the DCU morph into Stormwatch. That way in the DCU, you could have a lot of these heroes be tied to the corporations like Luthor Corp, and that would explain why they have these realistic outlooks on morality and more so just try to get the job done than actually being heroes. And they've already planted the seeds with this with characters like the Engineer, who is a member of the Authority and also worked for Planet Watch. Moving on to the next team, but staying on the more sinister side of things, I have the Legion of Doom. Not only do I think that the Legion of Doom is just the perfect matchup for the Justice League villain-wise, as I've already said time and time again, the Legion of Doom is is already built up practically at this point in the DCU. We have Sinestro coming in Lanterns, we have Lex Luthor already, Gorilla Grodd is confirmed, we have the likes of Brainiac and Man of Tomorrow. We know that the likes of Bane, Deathstroke, Clayface, and Joker exist in this universe, which means that for Batman villains, they have their pick of the litter and they could literally put anyone that they want on the Legion of Doom. And then we also have the likes of Cersei when it comes to the Wonder Woman aspect of things. Now, I'm not saying that they would have to utilize this exact roster for the Legion of Doom, but all I'm trying to point out is that the foundation for this faction or team in the DCU already exists, so they might as well just see it all the way through, in my opinion. Back to the superhero side of things, the next team that I want to see is also the Terrifics. Now, this is very similar to the Legion of Doom because we already have 2 out of the 4 members of the Terrifics in the DCU. And those members are Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho. The only 2 members that we're missing is the likes of Plastic Man and Phantom Girl. And Plastic Man is already confirmed for the DCU, so you can pretty much mark him down. That being said, if I were to adapt this team, I would do it similar to how I did the Outsiders with Batman. I would have Mr. Terrific make his own team before the formation of the true Justice League. So that way, when some heroes inevitably break off from the Justice Gang and or the Justice League International, they go and make their own factions. Mr. Terrific and Batman are just 2 examples of that. I feel like that just makes the most sense narratively, and that's the best way to fit all of these teams into this universe. Continuing this same trend, I do think that the Birds of Prey should also get another shot in the DCU as well. With the Bat family effectively being confirmed for the DCU, I think that it's a given that we get Oracle, and if we're getting Oracle, I feel like we just have to get the Birds of Prey in their true nature like how they are in the comics. So we need Black Canary, we need a true Cassandra Cain, not the one that we saw in the Birds of Prey movie that was ass. Harley Quinn does not need to be on the team. I would much rather get Lady Blackhawk. And Huntress is another character who's also already confirmed for the DCU, so it's perfect. This would also be a great way to have more female representation in the DCU as well. Moving on to the next team, and admittedly this is more so a wishful thinking type of thing because I do think that it's less likely that we get this team out of any other team that I've already mentioned. But that team is the Legion of Superheroes. Not only does this team have a plethora of cool DC characters like Lightning Lad, Karate Kid, and Mon-El, this team is also very pivotal to the early years of Superman. And that's because in the comics, when Superman was a kid and he operated as Superboy, he would often travel to the future and he would do his superhero adventures with the Legion of Superheroes, and they helped form him into the hero that he is in the present day as Superman. I think that exploring this depth of Superman's childhood is important because it showcases that Superman did have friends when he was a kid, and this also helps mold him again into what he is today. But also, I kind of like the idea of Superman knowing that he has powers and knowing that he has the capability of doing good and him acting on that as a kid. I don't think that Superman waiting until he's like 30 or 28 to finally use his powers is something that makes the most sense. So even though in the DCU it's stated that he's only been around for 3 years, they could easily go back and be like, oh, he was only Superman for 3 years, but he operated as Superboy when he was a teenager. So not only do you get to add more cool DC characters to the public eye by doing this, you also get to flesh out a little bit more of Superman's history. The final 3 teams that I'm going to go over are teams that are already effectively confirmed for the DCU and teams that are no-brainers, but I just need to explain them anyway because it wouldn't be a true team video without mentioning these factions. But the next team on my list is none other than the Green Lantern Corps. Obviously, again, like I already said, we know that this team is confirmed because we're getting the Green Lantern Corps in Lanterns, but I really hope that this faction is treated with the grace and respect that it deserves because the Green Lantern mythos in itself could be like Star Wars for DC. And that's because the Green Lantern mythos is effectively DC's bridge into the more cosmic elements of the entire DC universe. Obviously, you have other DC heroes that operate outer space like Superman, but again, the Green Lanterns are the poster boys for space travel and space fighting in the DC universe. And that's why a lot of DC events have the Green Lantern Corps at the epicenter. And I really just hope that we see every Lantern get their due respect because Hal Jordan needs to be in the fold, John Stewart needs to be in the fold, Guy Gardner needs to be in the fold, Kyle Rayner, the Four Corpsmen, we need to see Kilowog, we need to see Sodom Yat. There's just so many peak characters in the Green Lantern mythos that they just can't afford to waste it, in my opinion. The next team on the list is the Justice Society of America, and again, like I said, this team has already been confirmed for the DCU. We saw a mural of the JSA in Superman 2025 in the Hall of Justice. That being said, the JSA just need to be present in the DCU. They are like the founding fathers of superheroes in the DC mythos, so they just have to be there. The Justice Society plays a very pivotal role in how metahumans and other superheroes are viewed in the current day of the DCU right now. So them being established and us seeing how that journey went, in my opinion, is just something that should be prioritized priority, and an easy way to showcase this would be in a movie like Sergeant Rock or something. I would even be completely fine with a prequel JSA movie. Like, that's how much these characters mean to the DCU, and I think that they should give them that grace. And last but certainly not least, we have the team that we all know is going to be in the DCU, and that is the Justice League. This team just goes without saying, they're the most important team in the DC universe, and they're the team that has the most iconic superheroes in all of fiction. The Justice League is a team full of the poster boys of the DC universe. You literally cannot do a wider connected cinematic universe with DC without the Justice League. So overall, those are all of the teams that I personally would love to see in the DCU, and the teams that I think make the most sense to be in the DCU. If you guys have some of your own teams that you would like to see in the DCU that I haven't mentioned in this video, let me know in the comments. But that's going to wrap this video up, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit that hype button if you have the feature available. And until next time, it's been your boy K the God.